My name is Calvin Brooks, broadcasting from a half-lit booth in what's left of WNVA radio, just outside Newark, New Jersey. If you can hear this, it means the backup generator is still hanging on. I'm speaking fast because the lights flicker every few seconds, and I don't know how long this thing will stay alive. A few minutes ago, something slammed against the side of the building, hard enough to shake the shelves behind me. I thought it was debris from the highway, maybe a sign torn loose, but the sound didn't match metal. It was heavier. It hit and dragged. I didn't want to look outside again. Not right now. The wind is howling in a way I haven't heard in all my years here. It comes in waves, like it's building up strength somewhere out over the water and then rushing toward us, hitting the city like a freight train. The temperature dropped so fast that the windows on the east side cracked. I watched one split down the middle while I was setting up this old transmitter. It didn't burst out or shatter. It cracked like someone pressed a cold hand right onto it. The glass bent inward first, then froze. I can still see the frost in the shape of a ripple, like a frozen wave. The electrical grid around here keeps trying to restart. Every few minutes, the streetlights outside flick on, glow weakly, and blink out again. Transformers have been popping across the city since late afternoon. At first, you could count the blasts. 1, then 2. But around sunset, they started to sound like fireworks. Now, it's constant. Every few seconds, a dull thud somewhere in the distance. You can feel it more than hear it. I've been trying to reach our station manager since 5. His phone goes straight to voicemail. Last I heard, he was stuck on I-280. Caught behind a line of trucks that couldn't get enough traction to climb the incline near West Orange. Drivers abandoned their cars and tried to walk down the shoulder, slipping on the ice like they were on a frozen hill. A caller from that stretch said a semi slid sideways across both lanes and pinned 2 cars against the concrete barrier. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just engines idling and people shouting over the wind. If you're listening from anywhere along the I-95 corridor, you already know what I'm talking about. This storm isn't just dropping snow. It's pulling the whole coast apart. From DC to Boston, no stretch of the interstate is safe right now. Visibility is near zero in most places. Snow looks like smoke, blowing sideways across the road. Drivers can't see the barriers until they're already scraping against them. Earlier tonight, someone sent in a voice message saying they watched 3 cars slide straight into the same ditch within 15 seconds. Another person said they counted 8 cars piled up near Edgewood, north of Baltimore. One of them was a tractor trailer torn open down the side like a can. The cab was on its side across the median. No word on the driver. I'm not sure how accurate these reports are anymore. Cell service keeps dropping. Networks go down, try to come back, then vanish again. The news channels froze hours ago. TV broadcasts cut out mid-sentence. Even the emergency alerts stopped. That's what scared me most, when the alerts just stopped. No warnings, no updates, nothing. Earlier, around 4, I tuned into a shortwave band out of Harrisburg. The host was shouting over static, saying something about a truck hanging off a bridge on US 35 in West Virginia. Said rescue teams had to use ropes because no vehicle could get close. He said the truck was still swaying when they got the driver out. He said they shut down the whole highway. A few minutes later, his signal faded out. I tried to scan again an hour later, but there was only silence. Airports are just as bad. The last update I caught from a pilot in Rochester said all planes were stuck on the ground getting de-iced. He sounded calm at first, talking about standard delays, but then his voice broke a little. He said the ice was forming faster than they could clear it. Said they weren't sure if they could get the wings clean enough before the next freeze set in. He said something else too, something I keep thinking about. He said the storm wasn't the worst part. He said the air behind it, this Arctic blast moving down from the north, could freeze exposed skin in under a minute. That this was the coldest air they'd seen in years, maybe decades. He said the readings didn't make sense. Said they were dropping faster than the models ever showed. Somewhere around 7, the temperature outside hit single digits. Then it kept falling. I'm looking at the thermometer taped to the wall now. The needle just touched 0, and it's still going down. The radiator stopped working an hour ago. The studio feels like the inside of a freezer. When I breathe, I can see the fog drift across the desk. My hands are shaking a little, not from fear this time, just from the cold. If you're in the path of this freeze, get inside. Stay low. Block off any draft. Put something over your windows. Don't assume you'll have power. Don't assume you'll get help. I don't know how wide this outage is. I don't know what cities still have working shelters. I don't know what stations are still broadcasting. All I know is that in the last 3 hours, everything familiar has gone quiet. Traffic, planes, trains, the constant hum of the turnpike. All of it wiped out by this storm. A listener from Jersey City managed to call in earlier. Her name was Tara. She said she saw people trying to push a delivery truck that got stuck on a patch of black ice near the Holland Tunnel entrance. Said the wheels were spinning and spraying ice shards everywhere. She said one man slipped under the back tire when it suddenly jolted backward. Others tried to drag him out by his jacket before he slid any farther. She was crying when she said she didn't know what happened to him. Then her call cut off. I wish I could tell you things will get better soon. I wish I could tell you the worst is behind us. But the storm hasn't even reached its peak, and the freeze coming behind it, whatever this thing is, it's changing everything faster than people can react. If you can hear me, stay close. I'll keep talking as long as the generator lasts, as long as the transmitter stays warm enough not to seize up. As long as I'm able. Something else hit the roof just now. Not sure if it was ice or something the wind picked up. The vents above me rattled so hard that dust fell from the ceiling onto the console. This storm is not normal, and the things I've heard tonight, some of them don't sound like weather problems at all. But I'll get into that soon. Very soon. For now, if you're out there, hold on. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. I keep thinking about how this started. It didn't feel like the end of anything at first. It felt small, easy to ignore. A few days ago, the weather desk here was treating this like just another winter storm with a dramatic name, something to fill 6 minutes between ads, a nor'easter sliding up the coast, bringing snow, rain, the usual mess. We've seen dozens of those. We joked about it on air. I remember saying something about stocking up on hot chocolate and batteries. People called in with their usual stories about long lines at the grocery store and empty bread shelves. Nobody sounded scared, just annoyed. But little things were off, even then. Our weekend meteorologist, Dan, came in early on Monday. He never does that. He had this tight look around his eyes like he hadn't slept. He kept refreshing the same map over and over. I asked him what he was doing, and he just said, "These bands aren't moving right." At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. We all are, in this line of work. But he pointed at the loop, at this arc of heavy snow curling down from the Great Lakes, dipping farther south than normal before swinging back up toward New England. "It's bending," he said. "It shouldn't bend like that." That was the first thing. The second thing was the test alerts. You know those loud tones that interrupt radio and TV, the ones that say, "This is only a test." We got 2 of those in one day. That almost never happens. The first one was mid-morning, standard stuff, but the second one, late afternoon, glitched halfway through. The tone dragged. The voice on the recording slowed down like an old tape. "This is a test." And then the word test stretched so long it just became a low growl. Then the message cut off completely, and we were left with dead air. 2 minutes later, we got an email from someone at the National Weather Service office in Mount Holly. Not the usual list. This came from a personal Gmail account. The subject line was short. "You might want to stay on tonight." Inside, there was only one sentence. "The storm is not following any of our models now." No greeting, no name, just that line and a screenshot of a forecast graph with the axis labels cut off. I stared at that message for a long time, passed it to Dan. He swore under his breath and said, "They never send emails like this." He tried to call the office, got put on hold. Then the line dropped. We should have understood right then that this wasn't just another winter system, but people were still out shopping, kids were still at school, and flights were still leaving the airports. Life doesn't stop for a weird graph and a glitchy test alert. By Tuesday morning, though, the first real cracks showed up. Power flickered across northern Virginia before sunrise. We got a call from a listener named Marcus in Alexandria. He said the streetlights on his block were turning on and off in a strange pattern, like someone was flipping them manually. He said the sky over the Potomac had this dull green glow every few minutes. I thought it was transformers blowing. He thought it was something else. The lights go out, and then the clouds flash from the inside, he said, like heat lightning. But it's freezing, and it's coming from one spot, over and over. I tried to cross-check his story, pulled up a traffic camera feed near the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. The stream was choppy, but I could see snow starting to drift sideways, piling against the barrier. Every time the green light flashed, the picture glitched and smeared. Then the feed cut off entirely. Our newsroom group chat started to fill up with links. A 15-car pileup outside Richmond. A school bus sliding into a guardrail near New Haven. A semi stuck sideways on an overpass in Scranton, blocking both directions. At first, it just seemed like what happens when you mix thousands of cars with fresh snow and bad timing. But the number kept climbing. Someone pasted a line from a state trooper report. "We are witnessing accidents at a rate we cannot physically respond to." Then came the video from West Virginia. A local station recorded a tractor trailer hanging off the side of a bridge on US 35. You've probably seen clips of situations like that before. Angled cab, crushed rail, long drop. But this looked worse. The truck's cab was dangling almost completely over the river. The trailer was twisted, its back wheels still clinging to the ice-covered road by inches. The reporter on scene kept repeating that the driver was trapped in the cab, held in place by his seatbelt while the whole rig swayed in the wind. The part that stuck with me wasn't the dangling truck, though. It was the way the snow moved around it. It wasn't falling straight down or even sideways. It was spiraling around the cab, forming little tight circles, like the storm had found a point to cling to and was wrapping around it. The camera lens kept freezing over. They had to wipe it every few seconds. You could hear the reporter's teeth chattering while he held the mic. When they finally got the driver out with ropes and harnesses, the bridge shook. You could see it shiver. The reporter yelled, "They're shutting down all lanes!" And then the feed cut out. That was the third thing. By Tuesday afternoon, the I-95 corridor was a disaster. If you've ever driven that stretch between DC and New York, you know it's rarely quiet. It's a constant stream of motion, trucks and cars and buses and emergency vehicles, all rushing somewhere else. Today, callers described it as a graveyard of metal. Cars nose first in ditches, pickups sideways across lanes, trucks with trailers folded in half, jackknifed against median walls. On one call, a man from near Wilmington counted 12 vehicles off the road in less than 5 miles. He said it felt like driving through the aftermath of a battle. One caller, Lena from Baltimore, had the shaking voice of someone who'd been holding it together for too long. She said, "I saw a tractor trailer in the median, Calvin. The cab was crushed. There was nobody moving inside. People were just driving past, like they didn't have room in their heads to care anymore." She said she pulled over for a minute and just sat there with her hands on the wheel, unable to move forward or backward, stuck between fear and shock. We kept getting these stories. Different states, same theme. Overloaded highways, plows unable to keep up. Police spread thin, emergency lines clogged. And over it all, the storm kept tightening its grip. Somewhere between 4 and 5, the first real sign of something bigger dropped into my lap. A contact of mine, someone I went to college with who ended up working at a federal office in DC, called from a number I didn't recognize. I could hear noise in the background, people talking over one another, printers, some kind of intercom. He didn't say hello. He just said, "Are you live right now?" I told him no. We were in a commercial break and I was off the main feed, just watching the boards. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "They're calling it an Arctic outbreak," he said. "But that's not what this is." I asked him what he meant. He said they were seeing temperature drops that didn't match any historical pattern. That the cold air behind the nor'easter was plunging in from the north, sure, but it was also sinking straight down from the upper atmosphere faster than it should be able to. He said, the models all broke at once, every one of them. They tried to adjust the inputs, tried to account for unknowns, but the graphs just went off the page. We've got readings coming in from weather balloons over upstate New York that look like someone made a typo. Nobody's sure what to call this. I asked him what that meant for regular people. For anyone listening in their car or sitting in a dark house with a battery radio. He was quiet for a second. I heard something like a door slam on his end. Then he said, "If you've got any kind of platform left when this hits, tell people to assume they're on their own for at least a few days, maybe longer. Our systems were built on the idea that events move in a certain range and at a certain speed. This is outside that. Response plans are already behind, and the worst hasn't arrived yet." I asked him if this was climate change. He made this bitter sound, half laugh, half sigh. Climate change is a slow push. This is a punch. Something knocked the Arctic air loose and we weren't ready for how fast it would fall. I'm not cleared to say more than that. Then he said something that's been rattling around in my head since. Watch the grid. When the ice hits the lines and the cold hits the transformers at the same time, you'll know how bad this really is. The line began to crackle. I asked him if this was official advice or just personal. He said, "It's me asking you not to sugarcoat this on air." And then the call died. A few minutes later, the first wave of outages hit Pennsylvania. We saw it light up on the map behind the newsroom desk before we felt it here. A wide swath stretching from Pittsburgh toward Allentown. Little red icons blinking where substations had tripped. The anchor on TV tried to keep his voice level as he described temporary, rolling disruptions. But you could see real worry in his eyes. Even through the makeup and the studio lighting, you can't hide that kind of fear. Then there were the rumors. Theories spread through group chats and back channels, the kind that sit somewhere between truth and panic. One thread said this was a test gone wrong, that some experiment in the upper atmosphere had shifted wind patterns more than anyone expected. Another claimed that a piece of the polar vortex had broken off completely and was sliding south like a broken tooth. A third said this wasn't natural at all, that foreign powers had tampered with jet streams as part of some silent war. I don't know what's true. I'm just a guy in a freezing booth with a microphone and a failing power strip. But I can tell you this. Whatever the cause, the effects are real and getting worse. By early evening, Boston reported near whiteout conditions. New York City saw rain turn to sleet, then to sharp ice pellets that bounced off sidewalks like tiny stones. In Philly, callers said the Schuylkill Expressway had turned into a sheet of glass. In Connecticut, a listener named Tom from West Hartford described a truck losing control on I-84, jackknifing, and then flipping over the guardrail so slowly it felt like a nightmare unfolding frame by frame. He said, "I was 3 cars behind it, Calvin. I watched the trailer swing, and for a second it looked like it might stop. But then the back end lifted, and the whole thing just rolled over. The rail bent like it was made of plastic. The sound, I don't know how to explain it. It was like hearing a tree snap in a storm, but heavier." I asked him if emergency crews had arrived yet. He said there were no sirens, just the storm and the hiss of the wind. He said people were getting out of their cars with towels and blankets, slipping as they went, trying to get down the slope to the overturned truck. Then he said, "My phone battery is at 2%. I wanted to tell someone what I saw before it dies." Then he hung up. Hour by hour, the storm pulled more of the coast into its grip. Kentucky and Ohio had already been hit with a mix of snow and ice earlier in the day, sending cars sliding off rural roads and clogging interstates. That mess was now feeding into the larger system, like feeder bands wrapping into a hurricane. Closer to the Atlantic, the snow gave way to heavy, cold rain that still made travel nearly impossible. Hydroplaning, flooding, hidden ice beneath standing water. It didn't matter if it was snow or rain. If you were on the road, you were at risk. And always, behind it all, the deeper cold marched closer. You can feel it now, even in here. It's not just a number on a screen. It's the way the floor feels under your feet, like the cold is rising up from beneath the building. It's the way your breath hangs in the air just a little longer each time. It's the way the walls creak, as if they're shrinking. I keep checking this frequency, hoping to hear other stations. Sometimes I catch a faint voice from somewhere north, a man speaking calmly about shelter locations in Albany or Syracuse, but the signal fades before I can get the exact details. Once, I thought I heard a woman reciting coordinates, repeating them over and over. Then the static swallowed her whole. If you're listening and you still have power, charge everything. Phones, flashlights, anything with a battery. Fill your tub with water in case pipes freeze. Layer up. Put kids in every sweater they own. Check on your neighbors if you can do it without stepping onto ice. And if you're stuck in your car right now, somewhere on that long, broken spine of I-95 or any of the feeder highways, I'm going to say this plainly. If the traffic isn't moving and hasn't moved for a long time, and if you are not in danger of being hit by other vehicles, it might be safer to stay put with your hazard lights on. Run the engine in short bursts to stay warm, and crack a window just a little. Watch your exhaust pipe if you can see it. If it gets buried in snow, clear it. carbon monoxide doesn't care if this storm has a name or not. I wish I didn't have to say any of this. I wish I could lean on old phrases about how we've been through storms before, and we'll get through this one too. But the map on the wall says otherwise. The messages on my screen say otherwise. The silence from places that should be loud says otherwise. I'm going to stay with you through this as long as I can. If this frequency goes quiet, assume the worst here and focus on the best where you are. Make your own small light in the dark. Stay calm. Stay aware. Don't wait for official orders if your gut is telling you to move or to stay put. This storm started like any other. It's not like any other now. And from what I've been hearing from the few voices still coming through, what's coming after it is worse. I'll tell you what I mean in a moment. If you can hear my voice, you're not alone yet. You're tuned to whatever is left of WNVA. This is Calvin. I'm still here. For now. I'll stay focused on the breakdown. The parts people don't want to say out loud yet, but everyone can feel happening underneath everything else. The collapse didn't come with any big announcement. There was no final emergency alert saying the grid was about to fail. No press briefing telling people to stay home and prepare. It slid in quietly, almost politely at first, like a hand pushing down on a dimmer switch. But once it started, it was fast. Faster than anything I've seen in this part of the country. The first sign was the silence. Around 8 tonight, I realized I couldn't hear any traffic outside. Usually, even in the worst snow, you can pick out something. A siren, a plow, a bus trying to turn, chains scraping pavement. But the wind had swallowed all of it. When I stepped into the hallway to check the breaker panel, the quiet was so sharp it felt like someone had pressed their palm over my ears. Then I noticed the vending machine light was off. It's always on. Even when the station loses power, that thing somehow keeps glowing. But tonight, it was dark. I tapped it just to be sure. Nothing. Back in the booth, my phone buzzed weakly and then shut off. Not a normal shutdown. The screen glitched, flickered for a second, and then died. Battery had been at 30%. I tried turning it on again. Nothing. I looked out the window toward the street where the power lines run. Completely dark. No porch lights, no brake lights, no apartment windows glowing. Newark has a certain rhythm, a constant throb of brightness even on bad nights. Tonight it was just gone. A flat darkness stretching in every direction. Then the generators started to fail. You could hear them across the neighborhood when they first kicked in. Little bursts of mechanical coughing coming from behind stores and apartment buildings. One by one, they started sputtering out. I watched the glow from a corner grocery store flicker through its frosted windows and then blink out. Across the street, a laundromat's red sign stuttered and then died. The hum of the city sank lower and lower until it felt like everything was holding its breath. After that, the radio calls changed. Earlier today, people were describing roads, conditions, crashes, the usual storm chaos. But once the outages spread, the tone shifted. Callers weren't describing the storm anymore. They were describing the people around them. A man from Trenton said his entire block lost power within seconds. He watched neighbors step out onto their porches to look around. He said for the first 30 seconds it was calm. People calling out to each other across the street, checking if anyone still had power. But then someone shouted that their basement was flooding because the sump pump died. Another person yelled that their mother was on oxygen and the machine wasn't working. The street went from quiet confusion to frantic shouting in under a minute. He said he saw flashlights sweeping around like search beams, people running between houses, someone slipping on their stairs and screaming. He said he wanted to help, but the ice on the pavement was so slick he could barely stand, and the cold hit him so fast that his breath felt like shards in his throat. It wasn't safe to run, he said. It wasn't safe to stand still either. Then his line cut. A woman from Hoboken left a voicemail 10 minutes later. She said the power outage triggered the fire alarms in her building. People spilled into the stairwell, thinking there was a fire somewhere. Some were barefoot because they'd been sleeping or getting ready for bed. Children were crying because the stairwell lights flicked on and off while everyone was pushing and stumbling. By the time they reached the ground floor, the lights were gone completely. Total darkness. Someone used their phone flashlight to lead people toward the lobby, but the glare hit the ice on the floor and made everything look warped. She said the building door was frozen shut from the outside. She said they could see frost creeping along the inside frame. She said someone started pounding on the door from the outside, yelling that a pipe had burst in the street. Then the voicemail ended. Another call came from Hartford. This time a man named Rylan. His voice was tight, like he was trying not to panic. He said the intersection near Park Street was gridlocked with cars that had spun out. People were abandoning their vehicles because they were running out of gas and didn't want to freeze inside. He said they were slipping as they tried to walk, grabbing onto other people, falling together in piles. He said one guy was shouting at another driver because they had bumped mirrors, shouting about something that didn't matter at all. Then someone else shouted back. Then more joined in. Rylan said he saw a crowd form around two men arguing. Couldn't tell what the fight was about. Maybe nothing. He said the argument turned into pushing. People started yelling at the crowd to stop. But the cold was making everyone frantic. Nobody wanted to touch the ice. Nobody wanted to stay still. And nobody wanted to leave the one patch of ground where they felt anchored. The shouting grew louder until it echoed down the street. People are scared, he said. When people get scared like this, they stop thinking right. He said he heard glass breaking but didn't know where it came from. Someone else called from Queens, but they didn't say much. Just that the power went out across a huge area, high-rises going dark one after another like dominoes. No street sounds. No sirens. Even the subway rumble was gone. The caller whispered into the phone. It feels like the whole borough is sinking into quiet. Another message came in from someone stuck on I-95 near Stamford. They said a line of cars had been stuck so long that people were leaving their vehicles to check on others. One woman was knocking on windows asking for blankets for her baby. Another was screaming because her phone died and she hadn't been able to call her husband. People started banging on the doors of a tractor trailer that still had its lights on, begging to sit inside for warmth. The driver refused because he said once he let one person in, everyone would rush him. He wasn't wrong. The caller said people started shouting at him through the glass. Someone threw something, maybe a chunk of ice, at the windshield. Someone else started trying the door handles. The driver laid on the horn and didn't stop until the battery died. The line of cars is probably still stranded there. The storm still growing around them. The cold still pulling at everything it touches. And then there's the silence from officials. Usually by now, every governor from DC to Maine would be on camera, telling people to stay home, promising that help was on the way. You'd see footage of the National Guard rolling out convoys, of salt trucks, of emergency shelters. You'd see statements from FEMA, from the Department of Transportation, from mayors and fire chiefs. Tonight, nothing. No briefings, no official streams, no televised statements. Even the emergency alert system has gone quiet. That silence is spreading faster than the snow. Earlier, Someone from Massachusetts tried to call their city hotline about downed power lines. The line rang for a few seconds, and then played a recorded message. All circuits are currently unavailable. Not busy, unavailable. Same story from parts of Maryland and Rhode Island. A woman from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, said their local station went dark at 6. Just vanished from the dial. She said people in her neighborhood came outside to check on each other, only to find the street buried in half-frozen slush that was refreezing faster than they could shovel. She said the cold made her hands numb in under a minute. She said she hasn't heard a single siren in hours. And the worst part? People are starting to realize they won't get help before the freeze hits in full. So the shouting turns to panic. Panic turns into pushing. Pushing turns into breaking things. Doors, windows, sense of order. And the cold is making every second feel shorter, sharper, smaller. When you can't think straight because your body is shaking and your breath hurts and the dark is everywhere, the world gets smaller. People stop thinking about tomorrow. They only think about right now. The official systems are dropping one by one. The roads are unusable. The power is gone. The airports are frozen. The police can't get anywhere. Ambulances are stuck behind abandoned cars. Fire departments can't pump water because the hydrants are icing over. This isn't just a storm anymore. This is the moment everything else starts to crack. If you can hear me, stay with me. Stay inside. Stay warm. Lock your doors. Not because of other people, but because the cold will come through any gap it can find. Cover your windows. Keep your lights low so you don't drain power. Check on anyone around you, but only if it's safe to move. I'm going to keep going. I'm not stopping. Not while I still have heat from this generator and a little bit of time. If you're listening, hold on, because it gets worse from here. I don't know what time it is anymore. The clock on the wall froze at 9:17, but I know it's been at least an hour since then. Maybe longer. I keep tapping the glass, hoping the second hand will twitch back to life. But it just sits there, dead still. My watch stopped too. The cold does that sometimes. Drains the battery, slows gears, freezes the tiny things we trust to keep our days organized. Time feels different now. Thicker, heavier, like it's coated in ice just like everything else. The station creaked again a moment ago. The kind of sound a house makes before the roof caves under snow load. I looked up so fast I made myself dizzy. Nothing fell, not yet, but something up there shifted. I heard the beams groan like they're tired of holding all this weight. I keep expecting to see cracks inching across the ceiling tiles. Before the next part of this story, I need to tell you what's been happening in the city itself. Not the highways, not the suburbs, not the rural roads. The city, the places where people live shoulder to shoulder, where one bad night turns into something bigger because everyone is stacked on top of each other. Newark isn't a quiet place. Even on nights when it snows, you still hear people talking outside corner stores, buses crawling through slush, music from passing cars. Tonight, the city feels hollow, a shell. Almost every building in sight is pitch black. Streetlights died hours ago. The only light I see comes from a few cars stuck at odd angles in the middle of the street, their hazard lights blinking like they're calling out into the dark for anyone still close enough to answer. I opened the window earlier, not wide, just enough to let sound slip in. And what I heard scared me more than the storm. Nothing. Not distant traffic. Not dogs barking. Not the usual hum of planes overhead. Not even the low rumble of the power plant miles away that you don't notice until it's gone. But then, something else emerged from the silence. A scream. Short, fast, cut off. Somewhere a few blocks away. Not the kind of scream you hear during normal city life. This one was different, raw, full of panic. I leaned closer to the opening, trying to hear more, but the wind pushed snow straight inside, stinging my face. When I wiped my eyes and leaned in again, the sound was gone. That's when the first wave of radio interruptions came in. Not calls, not voices trying to reach me. Just interference. At first it was static. Then the static warped into this strange buzzing pattern, like someone dragging metal across concrete in a slow circle. The signal meter jumped, even though I didn't touch the dial. Then, for a moment, only a second or two, I thought I heard people talking underneath the noise, not clearly, more like faint murmurs, jumbled together, overlapping, as if dozens of voices were talking at once, but none were close enough to be understood. Then the static snapped back to normal. Whatever that was, I hope it was just the storm. I hope it was the wind hitting the antenna. But hope feels thin tonight. Around an hour ago, maybe more, I started getting messages from other cities. Texts blinked in for a moment before the towers fully died, and the picture they painted was, I'm not going to sand it down. It was bad. In Philadelphia, someone said grocery store doors were stuck shut because the electronic locks froze. People started pounding on the glass from the inside, trying to break free because the heat shut off and the temperature dropped fast. Workers were trapped with customers, trying to use metal racks to pry the doors open. Someone used a fire extinguisher to break a small window, but it shattered inward instead of outward because of the cold. The message ended before they said how it turned out. In Brooklyn, a woman said her apartment building lost heat first, then power. Families in her hallway were burning cardboard in metal pots to stay warm. Someone else tried lighting their stove, but the flame barely held. The cold killed it. People wrapped themselves in shower curtains, winter coats, blankets, anything they could find. She said she could see her own breath indoors. She said her window had frost inside the glass. Inside. In D.C., someone wrote that the grid failed in half the city before emergency generators tripped. Shelters filled immediately, but many people couldn't reach them because the sidewalks were frozen solid and the wind was blowing straight down the streets like a tunnel. People are falling every few feet, the message read. The ice is too thick. You can't run. You can barely walk. In Providence, someone said the National Guard was deployed hours ago, but the trucks couldn't get traction. He said he saw military vehicles stuck halfway up a hill, wheels spinning uselessly. Soldiers were pushing from behind, slipping in the snow like everyone else. One truck slid backward and had to be abandoned. But the worst story I've heard so far came from Manchester, New Hampshire. A caller named Dean reached me on the station's backup line. His voice was shaking. At first I thought it was fear. Then I realized it was from the cold. I could hear his teeth hitting each other. He said he went outside earlier to check on his neighbor. The man is in his 70s and lives alone. When Dean got to his porch, he saw the front door cracked open. Snow had blown inside. He called out. No answer. He stepped inside, slipping on the frozen floor. The house was like a refrigerator. He found the old man in the living room, sitting in his chair with a blanket over him. He wasn't breathing. Dean said he tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. He tried 4 times. Nothing. The screen froze, then went black. He walked back home, but the wind was so strong he had to crawl part of the way, using parked cars as shelter. His last words before the call died were, I don't think anyone's coming, Calvin. Not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. I think we're on our own now. I didn't know what to say to him. Not really. What do you say when the truth is sitting right there, heavy and cold and unblinking? He was still on the line when the signal dropped. I don't know where he is now. I don't know if he made it back inside. I keep thinking about him trying to cross that ice again. More reports kept pouring in before everything went dark. People stuck in elevators when backup power failed. Water mains bursting and freezing instantly. Traffic lights stuck on dark in every direction. Fire alarms blaring in buildings with no actual fires because the pipes inside froze and burst. People breaking into cars not to steal, but to shelter inside because it's warmer than the street. Some of the messages got angry. Not at me, but at the situation. Someone from Wilmington wrote, "Where are the crews? Where are the plows? Where are the authorities? Does anybody realize what's happening?" Someone else from Bridgeport said, "I called every number I could. Not one person picked up, not one." Someone from Arlington wrote, "It's not that we're freezing. It's that nobody is telling us what to do. Nobody is talking to us. Nobody is explaining anything. We feel cut off from the rest of the world." And that's the truth that's starting to sink in across every state. People aren't used to being completely alone. Not in this part of the country. Not this close to major cities. Not with this many systems that usually work. But tonight, the systems aren't working. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, nobody can pretend otherwise. Outside this booth, somewhere in the dark city, something metal just clanged against the side of the station. Hard. I felt it in the floor. I don't know if it was a sign blown off a building, or part of a roof, or a piece of someone's car. The wind is loud enough now that it's pushing against the walls like an ocean wave. I hear things shifting outside the door. Not voices, not footsteps. Just small cracking sounds, like something in the hallway is freezing and splitting. The cold is moving inside the building. That means I don't have long before it reaches this room. Before the equipment stops. Before my voice cuts out. There's more happening out there. Much more. And I'm not done telling it. If you're still with me, hold tight. The station door just shook again. A deep, low rattle that moved through the hinges like someone leaned their full weight against it. But nobody's here. I checked twice. The building is empty. Everyone else went home hours before the worst of this hit. The parking lot outside is dark and frozen. No cars, no tracks, nothing but snow blowing sideways across the pavement like smoke. Whatever hit that door was the wind, I'm sure of it. I have to be sure of it. The temperature in here keeps dropping. My breath hangs in the air like a thin cloud every time I speak. The mic arm is so cold that when I adjusted it a minute ago, it stuck to my sleeve. My fingertips are going numb even as I talk, but I'm not stopping. Earlier, before the grid fully failed, before the cell towers died, I got one last burst of messages, all of them describing the same moment, the one where order finally slipped out of reach. In city after city, the collapse wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't even panic at first. It was people realizing nobody was coming. You could feel that realization spreading through the reports in New York. A man in the Bronx said he watched neighbors stand outside their building staring down the empty street, waiting for the sound of sirens. He said they waited so long that their faces started to frost over around the edges of their scarves. Someone shouted into the dark for an ambulance. No answer. Someone shouted again. Nothing. Finally, someone threw a trash bag full of snow at a passing car, trying to flag it down, but the car skidded on the ice and kept going until it hit a mailbox. Baltimore. A caller named Aaron said the power outage spread so fast that entire blocks went dark at the same second, like someone flipped a massive switch. People stepped outside with flashlights, shining them down alleys and across front yards. When the wind hit, it blew the beams sideways. She said she heard someone yelling for their kid, but she couldn't tell which direction the voice came from. Richmond. Someone said drivers trapped on the interstate started banging on the doors of a tanker truck, begging the driver to open up. Another person punched out their own car window trying to get to their trunk for blankets because the locks froze. A few people tried walking along the shoulder, but the wind kept knocking them into the guardrail. Stamford. A man said traffic stopped for miles. No movement at all. He saw a mother holding her toddler to her chest, shielding the child from the wind with her coat. A few cars back, someone shouted at a driver who tried to change lanes. The shouting spread like a spark. People got out of their cars, not to fight, to move, to find warmth, to find someone with a working battery. But every step on the ice was a risk, and when someone fell, they screamed like they'd broken something. Providence. A group of neighbors tried to clear a path through the snow to reach an elderly couple on their street whose heat had shut off. But while they were digging, the wind filled the path back in. They tried again. Same thing. After 20 minutes, they gave up and started pounding on the couple's door, but the locks were frozen from the inside. Someone tried kicking it, but their boots slipped and they fell sideways into the snow. Every message had that same desperate tone. Not hysteria, not chaos, just the creeping awareness that no one had control anymore. And that's when the fight started. Not big fights, not brawls, just cracks in the surface. The little moments where fear and cold and frustration mix into something sharp. A woman from Pittsburgh said she saw two men arguing over a portable generator in a parking lot. One had brought it for his family. The other needed it for his neighbor's oxygen machine. Neither was wrong. Both were shivering so hard, the generator rattled between them. She said they ended up pulling at it from opposite sides until the thing tipped over and fell onto the ice. When it hit the ground, fuel leaked out. The two men just stared at it, stunned. Then one started crying. The other walked away without a word. A caller from Worcester, Massachusetts, said her apartment building lost heat around 7. People came into the hallway carrying blankets and flashlights, trying to gather near the stairwell because it was warmer. But there wasn't enough room. Someone told another family to move. Someone else told a man he couldn't sleep there. Voices rose. The hallway got louder. People pushed past each other trying to claim space that didn't exist. The caller said she grabbed her daughter and locked themselves in the bathroom because it was the only room with a working latch. Then the pipes burst in the unit above them. Water poured through the ceiling vent, freezing almost instantly. She said the ice formed a thin layer across her tile floor in seconds, trapping the door shut. She couldn't open it again. She screamed for help. Nobody heard her. She left that message crying into the phone. I still don't know how she got out. Someone from Cambridge said an entire block went dark, and people began checking in on each other floor by floor. But when someone knocked on one apartment door, a man inside started yelling that he didn't want strangers near him. He shoved the door hard enough to knock the person outside onto the frozen hallway floor. When neighbors tried helping her up, the man inside screamed at them too. Get away! Stay away! Like they were a threat. Fear does strange things when the world gets cold enough. Then came the earliest signs of something more organized falling apart. A text message that barely made it through from someone who claimed they were with the fire department in New Haven. Multiple stations offline, engines stuck, plows can't reach us, no heat, no backup, dispatch down. We've lost contact with half the city. A second message, this one from a friend of someone who works in a Boston hospital. Generators failing. ICU moving patients into hallways for warmth. Some ventilators not working. Staff crying. Cells down. No one knows when help is coming. I don't know if those were the last messages sent from those places, but I haven't heard anything since. Then, right around the time the power died fully here, the last call I managed to take before the tower froze was a man from northern New Jersey, about 2 miles from this station. He said he was stuck in his car on a side street after sliding into a snowbank. Nothing serious. But when he looked around, every house on the block was dark. No lights. No movement. He stepped out of the car to check on nearby homes, using his phone flashlight to guide him. He walked to the first house. Knocked. No answer. Then another. No answer. At the third house, he saw movement inside, just a faint silhouette. He called out to them. The silhouette moved closer. He called again. Then he stopped talking. For 5 full seconds, he didn't make a sound. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. There was frost on the inside of their windows. I asked what he meant. He said, "It looked like the house was freezing from the inside out, like the cold wasn't just outside, like something pushed it in." I asked if the person inside was okay, but before he could answer, the line cut off. The cell tower must have gone down. I haven't heard him since. The wind is so loud now, it feels like the walls are breathing. The generator stutters every few minutes. The lights flicker like they're trying to decide whether to stay alive. The cold is pressing in from under the door. If you can hear me, wherever you are, remember this. You're not imagining it. You're not overreacting. This is what it feels like when a system built on the assumption of stability finally meets something stronger than it can handle. This is what it feels like when the night takes over. The light in here dimmed again. Not all the way out. Just enough to make everything look bruised, like the room itself is fading. The generator is coughing every few seconds. This uneven rhythm that makes my stomach tighten every time it dips quiet. I keep thinking the next breath it takes might be its last. Before it does, I need to keep going. Because the collapse, the real collapse, wasn't just regular people losing power or getting stuck. It wasn't the cars sliding into ditches or the frozen doors or the buildings going dark. It was when the people whose entire job is to help, the ones we all assume will always show up, started breaking under the weight of this storm. That was the moment everything tipped. It started with the police. A few scattered reports at first. Nothing official. Nothing on record. Just whispers through messages that blinked in and out while the cell network still had breath left. Someone from Camden said they called 911 about a man collapsed outside a bus stop. The operator answered, but her voice was shaking. She said their system was overloaded. Said they had no patrol cars available. Said the roads were impassable. Said the line needed to stay open for life-threatening emergencies. The caller yelled that this was a life-threatening emergency. The man wasn't moving, wasn't responding. The operator said she understood, but had no units to send. No ambulances either. Every available one was stuck, or responding to a different call they probably couldn't reach either. The line cut after that. In Hartford, someone texted the station saying they saw 2 police officers trying to push their cruiser through an icy intersection. Not drive it. Push it. They were leaning into the trunk with their boots slipping while the wheels spun uselessly. A few people tried helping them, but the wind pushed everyone sideways. The cruiser ended up sliding back into a snowbank. The officers gave up, locked the car, and started walking. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just 2 silhouettes fading into the storm. In Philadelphia, someone messaged that a group of officers tried redirecting traffic around a massive pileup near the airport, but the wind kept throwing sheets of ice across the road like invisible waves. They were slipping, stumbling, grabbing onto cars for balance. Someone said one officer fell and couldn't get back up because the ice was so slick. 2 people ran out to help him. All 3 of them slid downhill together. The message ended with, "They're trying. They just can't fight this." And then the fire departments. That's when things got even worse. A firefighter from Yonkers, voice tight, breath shallow, managed to reach the station line before everything dropped. He said they were responding to calls about people trapped in apartments without heat. Said they were using axes to break into buildings because the electronic keypads froze. Said they carried blankets, heaters, anything they could fit in their trucks. Then he said the trucks couldn't climb one of the hills. They tried using chains. Still slid. They tried turning around. The rear end swung out and almost hit a parked car. Finally, the captain told everyone to abandon the truck and walk. So they did, in full gear, through ice that was so smooth and hard it felt like walking on glass. He said they made it halfway to the building before the wind knocked one of his crew down. The guy hit the pavement hard. The others rushed to help, but they kept slipping too. He didn't say whether the man was injured. He didn't say if they made it to the building. The call cut off before he finished. But the message he left behind stuck with me more than anything else tonight. We're not designed for this. Hospitals started breaking next. Not physically, though some probably are, but operationally. The last messages from medical workers were some of the most desperate. A nurse from Beth Israel in Newark wrote, "All generators overloaded. Hallways full. Patients wrapped in anything we can find. We're losing heat room by room. ICU running on partial power. Some ventilators stalling. We are manually bagging 2 patients because the machines froze." Another message from a doctor in Philadelphia. "We have no more blankets. No more space. No one can get here. Staff who tried driving and abandoned their cars and walked half a mile through ice. 2 slipped and were brought inside with broken bones. We don't have enough hands. We don't have enough heat. We don't have enough anything." Someone else from Boston wrote, "Emergency room full of people with hypothermia. Lines out the door. We're using stairwells to keep patients off the streets. It still isn't enough. Power flickering. If generators fail, we lose half this building." Some messages were even harder to read. This one from Rhode Island Hospital. "We lost a child tonight. Not from an injury. From cold, inside, in a city on the East Coast. What is happening?" And then, the worst message of the night. It came from someone claiming to be an EMT in West Hartford. "No units available. Roads closed. Snow too deep. Ice too thick. We received a call from a family trapped in their home with no heat. Child unconscious. We tried to dispatch. No one could get traction. We tried calling nearby volunteers. They couldn't reach the house. We called again. The mother screamed into the phone for help. Then the line died. 4 minutes later, we couldn't get there. I sat here for 5 minutes without speaking after reading that. The storm doesn't care who we are. It doesn't care what systems we built, what promises we made to each other, what uniforms we wear, what titles we hold. But the final break, the true crack in the structure, came when state hotlines started playing automated messages telling people to shelter in place until further notice. Further notice never came. Not once. Not from any official anywhere. No governor statements, no press conferences, no FEMA alerts. Nothing. Just silence swallowing the entire coastline. Then the looting started. Not because people wanted to steal, because they were freezing. A man from Jersey City left a voice message that barely made it through before the network died. He said he saw a line of people outside a closed pharmacy, pounding on the frozen doors. Not rioting, not angry, just desperate. They wanted hand warmers, blankets, space heaters, anything. Someone threw a trash bin at the side window. It cracked, but didn't break. Another person tried, then another. When the glass finally shattered inward, the people didn't rush inside. They shuffled. Slow, numb, more tired than angry. A different caller from South Boston said he saw people breaking into their own cars because the locks had frozen solid. Windows shattering up and down the street. Not from theft, but from people trying to reach their own supplies. And in New Haven, someone said a grocery store's front door froze shut. A group of neighbors used a fallen stop sign as a battering ram just to get inside and escape the cold. Once they were in, they didn't grab food first. They grabbed cardboard boxes and used them as insulation. A woman from Baltimore said she watched people light small fires inside metal trash cans in a parking garage because the wind was too strong outside to stay warm anywhere else. A man kept feeding the fire with pages torn from his own notebook. She could see his hands shaking as he ripped out each page. Then came the part that scared me the most. The disappearance of official communication. No tweets, no alerts, no news anchors, no statements from the White House, no NOAA updates. Nothing but dark screens and silent channels. People have always believed that someone, somewhere, is watching over the situation. That there are teams of experts tracking everything from satellites to road conditions. That the people in charge will eventually explain what's happening and tell us what to expect. Tonight proved something nobody wanted to admit. The people in charge lost control hours ago. They just haven't said it out loud. And now the helpers, the police, the paramedics, the firefighters, the nurses, the crews. They're trying to hold on, but the storm is stronger than they are. The cold is stronger than they are. The silence is stronger than they are. Outside the booth, something just cracked. A loud snap from the direction of the stairwell. It echoed through the hallway like a gunshot before fading into the wind. The cold is pushing through the walls. I can feel it crawling along the floor tiles under my chair. The generator is losing steam. I can hear it straining like a tired animal. I don't know how long I have left on this frequency, but I'm going to keep going as long as the mic picks up my voice. There's more. Much more. And the night hasn't reached its coldest point yet.